Excuse me. This way. The service entrance is around the back.
I didn't know we were having the valet park inside.
Oh my God, look at his jacket! How embarrassing.
Look at the screens. Are those bank records?
Oh my God, this can't be happening.
Leonard Vance was 42 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, and quiet in a way that made people underestimate him before he ever said a word. His skin was a rich dark brown, his beard was trimmed dough but never flashy, and his hair was kept in short, clean twists touched lightly with gray at the temples. He had the kind of face that looked calm even when he was furious, and the kind of eyes that notice everything. Most people who passed him on the street saw only an ordinary black man in worn denim, work boots, and old jackets that looked 2 decades out of date. They never saw the owner of Vance Urban Capital, a man with investments spread across hospitals, real estate, transportation, and media. They never saw the billionaire. That was exactly how Leonard wanted it. For nearly 3 years, Leonard had been quiet studying one of the biggest real estate charity circles in Atlanta. A glittering little empire run by people who preach community uplift while feeding on the poor in private. On the outside, the group looked noble. Their leader, Reginald Whitmore, was a polished 50s who always wore velvet tuxedo jackets, designer cufflinks, and a smile that never touched his eyes. He held charity galas, gave interviews about black excellence, and promised affordable housing for working families. But behind the scenes, buildings were being stripped, elder residents were being pushed out, and city grants disappeared into shell companies. Leonard had heard whispers, then numbers, then names. Needed proof. That was why, on a damp Thursday evening in October, Leonard walked in the grand lobby of the Whitmore Crown Hotel, dressed like a maintenance contractor. He wore faded black jeans, a heavy canvas jacket, and carried a dented toolbox that held more legal documents than tools. The ballroom upstairs was hosting the Whitmore Foundation's annual Legacy of Hope Gala, a brack tea event packed with city officials, celebrities, pastors, influencers, and Atlanta's polished elite. Leonard had a staff badge around his neck with the name Vance typed in small letters. Nobody looked twice. He was almost to the service elevator when a sharp female voice sliced through the lobby. "Excuse me, you stop right there." Leonard turned slowly. A woman in a fitted ivory gown was striding toward him, as if the marble floor belonged to her. Simone Whitmore, Reginald's 38-year-old daughter, the public face of the foundation, and one of the most talked about women in Atlanta social media circles. Simone was stunning in the polished, intentional way that came from money and rehearsal. Honey, brown skin, razor, sharp cheekbones, a sleek asymmetrical bob diamond earrings that flashed under the chandelier light, and a look of permanent superiority. She glanced at Leonard's boots, then his jacket, then the toolbox in his hand, and her mouth curved in disgust. "This lobby is for guests," she said. "Service staff enter through the rear corridor. Didn't anyone train you?" Leonard kept his tone even. "I'm here on scheduled business." Simone laughed under her breath and folded her arms. "Scheduled business? With that?" Her eyes dropped to the toolbox again. "Please don't insult me. The gala starts in less than 20 minutes. We do not need random contractor wandering through the front like they belong here." A few nearby guests turned to watch. Leonard could feel the heat of their curiosity, but he stayed calm. "I'm not wandering. I was cleared." "By who?" Simone snapped. "Who exactly cleared you?" Before Leonard could answer, another voice joined in. "Simone, is there a problem?" It was Malcolm Reed, Simone's fiancé, 40 years old, handsome, smooth, and dangerously fake. He was the kind of man who wore expensive confidence like cologne. Tailored black tuxedo, gold watch, bright smile, for the cameras. Cold heart behind it. Malcolm came from old money, but he had built his own image as a venture capitalist and community ambassador. Leonard already knew Malcolm's name appeared in 2 shell firms linked to Whitmore's missing housing grants. Simone tilted her head toward Leonard. This man somehow walked in through the front, pretending he has business upstairs. Malcolm looked Leonard up and down and smirked. Well, brother, unless your business is fixing plumbing, you may be in the wrong building. A few guests chuckled. Leonard's jaw tightened, but his face didn't move. I'm exactly where I need to be. Malcolm stepped closer, lowering his voice, just enough to sound threatening without losing the smile. Let me tell you something. Nights like this are for people who built something, people who contribute. Not every man in work boots can stand in a luxury hotel and pretend he belongs. The words hung in the air like poison. Leonard had heard insults before. He had heard richer ones, crueler ones, more subtle ones. But there was something filial in Malcolm's tone, something so polished it almost sounded respectable, and that made it worse. It was the voice of a man who believed wealth gave him the right to decide another black man's value. Simone turned to the front desk manager. Please have security escort him out. Quietly. I don't want this turning into a scene. But Leonard looked directly at her and said, You may want to rethink that. Simone smiled like she was dealing with a stubborn child. No, I don't think I do. Seconds, 2 security guards approached. One of them, a middle-aged black man with kind eyes, hesitated when he saw Leonard's calm face. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us. At that moment, Reginald Whitmore himself entered from the private hallway, already surrounded by an orbit of wealthy donors and photographers. He was a dark-skinned man, with silver hair brushed back, a commanding posture, and the kind of practiced charisma that made churches and city councils trust him too quickly. When he noticed the small crowd, he frowned. What's happening here? Simone gestured toward Leonard. Just a staff issue. This man came through the front and refuses to leave. Reginald studied Leonard for half a second. Then, instead of asking questions, he gave the kind of dismissive shrug wealthy men reserve for people they consider invisible. Remove him. We're too close to showtime for nonsense. That one word landed harder than the rest. Nonsense. Leonard Slow set his toolbox on the marble floor. Mr. Whitmore, he said, voice low and steady. You may want to be very careful about what happens next. Reginald chuckled. And why is that? Leonard held his gaze. Because the wrong man is being escorted out of this building. Malcolm laughed openly now. Oh, this should be good. Guests were stopping completely now, phones subtly lifting, whispers spreading from one end of the lobby to the other. A woman in a gold gown murmured, Is this some kind of stunt? A man near the bar smirked, probably another activist trying to make a scene. Simone her eyes. Take him out. One guard reached for Leonard's arm. And that was the moment Leonard decided he had enough. He reached into the inside pocket of his weathered jacket and pulled out a slim black card case. From it, he removed a platinum access badge, embossed with the insignia of Vance Urban Capital, and a second card bearing city authorization stamps. Then he calmly handed both the hesitant security guard. Before you put your hands on me, Leonard said, read those. The guard took the cards, and his face changed almost instantly. He looked from the badge to Leonard, then back again. Sir. Simone frowned. What is it? The guard swallowed. This says he's Leonard Vance. Silence. One spoke. No one moved. Malcolm's smiles cracked first. That's impossible. But Reginald's expression changed completely. He knew the name. Everybody in serious business knew the name. Leonard Vance was one of the most elusive investors in the Southeast, a billionaire known for buying entire distressed neighborhoods, restoring them, and then placing them under resident protection agreements that made exploitation nearly impossible. He almost never appeared in public, almost never gave interviews, and was rumored to make major acquisitions with ever stepping onto a stage. her face straining of color. No, you're lying. Leonard bent down, opened the battered toolbox, and pulled out a leather folio thicker than a family Bible. I'm not lying, he said. But you all have been. He looked directly at Reginald now. 3 years ago, your foundation received city-backed housing grants under the promise of restoring 7 apartment property for working black families and seniors. Instead, those properties were transferred through hidden entities, stripped for profit, and left condemned. Rent records were falsified. Repair contracts were inflated. Residents were pressured out. And your future son-in-law helped move the money. Malcolm stepped forward, anger flashing across his face. You can't just come in here making accusations. Leonard calmly slid several documents from the folio and handed them to the security guard, then to a city council member who had gone pale at the edge of the crowd. Bank transfers, property chains, internal emails, recorded contractor statements, and one more thing. He nodded toward the ceiling. At that exact second, the giant digital screens in the lobby and ballroom flickered. The glamorous welcome display vanished. In place, a sequence of documents, shell company records, withdrawal ledgers, forged maintenance reports, eviction patterns. Text messages between Malcolm and Reginald, and a video clip of Malcolm laughing while saying, "Poor people will live anywhere if you put a fresh coat of paint in the lobby." Gasps exploded across the room. Guests began shouting. Some stepped backward in horror. Others pulled out their phones openly now, recording everything. A pastor's wife covered her mouth. A councilwoman muttered, "Oh my God." Somewhere in the back someone said, "He exposed them live." Simone turned to Malcolm in disbelief. "Tell me this is fake." But Malcolm said nothing, because he'd had just seen the final screen. A wire transfer totaling $18 million. His signature was on it. Reginald's polished mask finally shattered. "How dare you hijack my event?" Leonard stepped forward, calm as ever, suddenly towering over the whole room without raising his voice. "Your event? You've been collecting applause with money stolen from black families who trusted you." You smiled in front of cameras while grandmothers slept in mold, invested units. You called me nonsense in your lobby while I was carrying enough evidence to bury your empire. Reginald lunged toward him, furious, but security blocked him. "Oh, now you want security," Leonard said softly. "Interesting." Simone's breathing grew shallow. "Why would you do this here?" Leonard turned toward her, and for the first time, his voice carried visible hurt under the steel. "Because humiliation is the language your family speaks best. You understand public shame better than private truth." That line silenced even the whispers. Then, Leonard looked at the crowd. "Some of you in this room donated money tonight because some of you were helping community, some of you endorsed these people. Some of you defended them because they wore expensive clothes, made polished speeches, and knew the right people. Meanwhile, you looked down on the workers who held the doors, cleaned the tables, fixed the lights, and kept your fantasy running. Tonight, I came dressed like the men you ignore, and you told me exactly who you are." It hit the room like a confession nobody wanted to hear. A woman in pearls lowered her phone. A young waiter in the back stood a little straighter. Even the security guard who first approached Leonard looked emotional. Then the ballroom doors burst open. 2 state investigators entered, with uniformed officers behind them. Nobody had to ask why. Leonard had arranged everything perfectly. One investigator, a tall black woman with braided hair and a navy pantsuit, walked straight to Reginald. "Mr. Whitmore, Mr. Reed, we have warrants related to financial fraud, grant theft, conspiracy, and falsification of public housing repair documents." "This is insane. This is a misunderstanding." The investigator didn't blink. "Save it for processing." Handcuffs clicked. The sound echoed through the hotel like a judge's gavel. Simone let a broken gasp as Malcolm was restrained. Malcolm turned toward her with panic all over his face. Simone, do something. But for the first time in her adult life, Simone had no power in the room. Her father was being questioned, her fiancé was in cuffs, the guests were staring, and the man she had treated like dirt was standing in the center of it, all like a storm she never saw coming. Reginald, desperate and humiliated, glared at Leonard. What do you want, money? An apology? Leonard looked at him with almost painful disappointment. That's your problem, you still think everything has a price. Then he turned to the council members and investors still frozen in disbelief. Tomorrow morning, Vance Urban Capital will acquire every damaged property connected to the Whitmore network that can legally be recovered. Every displaced tenant we can identify will be housing assistance, relocation support, or first right of return after restoration. An independent public audit will be funded in full. And the scholarship money promised in Tight's program, I'll triplet but go through real community trustees, not a family laundering generosity through vanity. A murmur rolled through the room, this time not of mockery, but awe. Simone stared at him. You planned all this? Yes, Leonard said, because men like Malcolm and families, like yours, only respect power once it embarrasses them. She shook her head slowly, tears. Not tears rising, not the soft tears of heartbreak, but the uglies of a woman realizing her name could no longer protect her. You could have just exposed us quietly. Leonard gave her a cold, final look. And you could have treated a working man with dignity. We both made choices. That line finished her. Simone sank into a chair near the front desk, trembling as cameras flashed and whispers turned in headlines in real time. Reginald was led away, red face and raging. Malcolm kept twisting in his cuffs, begging his lawyer on speakerphone to answer. The giant screens still glowed with evidence too bright to deny. And right in the middle of that ruined luxury, Leonard reached down, picked up his old toolbox, and closed it with a soft click. The same doorman who had nodded at him earlier stepped forward and said quietly, Mr. Vance, I didn't know. Leonard gave him a small, tired smile. That's all right. You gave me more respect than most people in this building. The man's eyes filled. Thank you, sir. Started toward the exit, but before he reached the doors, a voice called after him. Mr. Vance. It was one of the younger women from the catering staff, maybe 24, slim, dark-skinned, natural curls tied back, still wearing white serving gloves. Leonard had noticed her earlier because she was one of the few people who didn't laugh when Simone mocked him. She stepped forward nervously. My grandmother lived in one of those buildings, she said, her voice shaking. She got sick after the mold spread. We complained for months. Nobody listened. Leonard stopped. What was her name? He asked gently. Loretta James. Leonard nodded slowly, as if sealing the name into memory. She'll be heard now. The young woman started crying, not loudly, just that quiet, overwhelmed kind of crying that comes when somebody finally believes your pain counts. Len placed one hand over his heart and then walked out into the Atlanta night. Rain had started falling again, soft at first, then steadier, washing the city in silver. Black SUVs waited at the curb, but Leonard didn't get in right away. He stood under the awning and looked back through the glass at the chaos still unfolding inside the Whitmore Crown Hotel. The wealth, the gowns, the tuxedos, the crystal lights, the care for performed dignity, it all looked so small now. He thought about how many times people had mistaken simplicity for weakness, how many times they had assumed worn boots meant a small bank account, and a quiet voice meant no power. How many times black men like him had been judged in seconds and dismissed in less. But tonight had given him something money never could. Tonight, they had revealed them before he ever had to reveal his title. By sunrise, every Lokestay in Atlanta was leading with the scandal. By noon, national outlet picked it up. Billionaire investor exposes housing fraud at charity gala. Whitmore Foundation collapses after live evidence reveal. Atlanta elite as hidden owner, unmasked corruption. Social media ran clips of Simone sneering at Leonard in the lobby beside clips of Malcolm being led away in cuffs. People dissected every second. The workers in the hotel had their own version of the story, and theirs spread fastest. Over the next few weeks, the fallout grew uglier for the Whitmores and brighter for the people they had harmed. Lawsuits surfaced. Accounts were frozen. Board members resigned. Donors demanded investigations. Residents who had been silenced began speaking publicly. And when Vance Urban Capital officially stepped in, repairs started immediately. Temporary housing checks were issued. Medical assistance funds were established. Community meetings were held in person, not behind closed doors. Leonard attended several of them dressed the same way he always had, plain jacket, boots, no ego. The people trust him more because of it. 1 month later, Leonard stood in front of one of the restored apartment buildings on Auburn Avenue as children played. Near new painted railings and elder tenants sat under a shaded courtyard he had personally approved in redesign. Reporters waited nearby, hoping for a statement. Leonard rarely gave interviews. But this time, he stepped to the microphone. "I was asked why I wore old clothes to a gala full of powerful people," he said, his deep voice carrying over the crowd. The answer's simple: because character recognized character before it recognized status. If your respect depends on what someone wears, drives, or flashes in your face, then what you offer isn't respect at all. It's submission to wealth. The crowd clapped. Leonard paused, then continued. They looked at me and saw someone easy to dismiss. That was their mistake. But the bigger issue isn't that they insulted a billionaire. The bigger issue is that they insult people. Like that everyday, working people, struggling people, invisible people, without ever expecting consequences. My revenge wasn't just exposing them. My revenge was making sure the people they ignored got restored while their lies collapsed in public. That line made the crowd erupt. And Leonard, the so-called man that tried to throw out, stepped away from the microphone, not as a victim, not merely as a billionaire, but as something more dangerous than both. A man who had been underestimated long enough. A man who knew exactly how to make arrogance pay in front of the whole world. And somewhere in a cell, Malcolm Reed still replayed the moment he laughed at Leonard's work boots. Somewhere in a mansion stripped of prestige, Simone Whitmore still heard Leonard's words, "We both made choices." And somewhere in every room where people had ever confused quiet with powerless, the story of Leonard Vance kept traveling like fire. Because sometimes the most dramatic revenge isn't screaming. Sometimes it's letting people humiliate you just long enough to destroy them in public.